Because she's listening. I don't think anybody- Oh, here.
Rory Charles, Commissioner Precinct 1.
Present.
Devin Allen, Commissioner Precinct 2. Here. Gary Pickens, Commissioner Precinct 3.
Here.
Jake Johnson, Commissioner Precinct 4.
We heard you. Go ahead and say it. Can you hear us?
Here.
Here. Thank you. Our invocation today will be delivered by our own Tom Spencer. Tom, thank you for coming out today. After the invocation, please remain standing for our pledges.
Let's pray. On this day of decision-making, we pause to acknowledge you as creator and ruler. We praise you because righteousness and justice are the foundation of your throne. We praise you because you are more powerful and more loving than we can imagine. We thank you for your word that's always true. We thank you for the hope you've given us and the best is yet to come. We thank you for your guidance and instruction. We thank you for bringing us into the family business. We thank you for our families, our children, our grandchildren. Keep them safe. Help us walk with you along the paths of peace, knowing there will be difficulties along the way, but we can face them confidently in your strength. Help us to learn to thank you for each problem we encounter and watch how you transform trials into blessings. Help us to realize you don't call the equipped to do your work, you equip the called. Help us to see the need to take advantage of every day and enjoy the opportunity to serve our fellow man. We pray for protection for all those in harm's way. We pray for those impacted by the virus. Shower them with blessings and comfort. Guide our thoughts and decisions today, for it's in Jesus' holy name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to the Texas state, under God, indivisible. I'm still having trouble hearing.
Good. We got to work on this today. I think agenda announcements.
All right, thank you, Judge, members of court. Regarding agenda announcements today, we have a few changes. Under the juvenile section, consent item 8E1, we are going to hold this for 1 week. This is a contract renewal that has some changes to the dollar amount, so this will be modified and brought back to court for consideration next week. In regards to the order of the agenda today, as we've done in the past weeks, when it comes to the administrator's section, we will first move to the briefing agenda, and we'll have Vinnie Tenasia present the public health update on current and emerging health issues, and then we'll move forward with the agenda after that. And that's all we have. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Court members, you have before you the minutes of our regular meeting of December the 15th.
Move for approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Commissioner Allen, I believe you have a moral resolution for ratification.
Yes, I read this into the record a few weeks ago, so just for the purpose of today, are ratifying it, so I move for approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Are there any other announcements at this time?
Yes, I do have an announcement. Thank you, Judge. I would like to welcome a new member to the Precinct 2 team. Her name is Nan Taylor. She's with us here today. Nan, if you'll stand. Nan has been a lifelong resident of Tarrant County, and she's worked in oil and gas for over 28 years. She has been married to her high school sweetheart for 39 years. They have 1 daughter and 2 grandchildren. Nan is joining the Precinct 2 team as our office administrator. She'll be working on a number of efforts, including managing my schedule. So good luck to her on that. But please join me in welcoming Nan. Thank you, Judge. That's all I have.
You bet. For members, you have before you the consent agenda with the change that Ms. McMillan mentioned a few minutes ago.
Move for approval?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Ms. McMillan?
Your Honor, if we'll have Vinnie Tenasia come forward now to present the briefing item.
Come on down, Vinnie.
Morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Your Honor, and members of the court. So we'll try to do a quick briefing on COVID. And the emphasis on quick, I'll really try. Okay, so let's see if I can get the help from the back. Moving slides. Next slide, please. Okay, maybe move too far. Okay, so situational awareness, as you all are aware, we're not doing good in the county. I mean, we've got 145,000 cases over the holiday weekend. As you know, we were averaging about 2,000 cases a day. Today's sort of a comparatively better, I think about 1,350 or so. And then 1,448 deaths. I think we're adding 23 deaths this morning. Hospitalizations continue. We're precariously close to having some real problems. Tarrant County hospitals are almost 31% full from a bed capacity standpoint with COVID, and number of people in the hospital with COVID compared to the total population is even higher. We've got 1,323 people in Tarrant County hospitals that have COVID. That's a lot of folks. 258 of those are in ICU. That's about 52% of our ICU capacity. 1 in 5 COVID patients end up in the ICU, so that number's trending, so almost 20%. And as you know, people in the ICU tend to have poor health outcomes. We usually see a lot of deaths occurring. It's harder to sort of get out of that situation. So that's the concern there, that we've got so many people going into the ICU. We've got 6 ICU beds remaining as per the RAC report. So that's very low. I've said this before, this is not something that we should be taking lightly. As a community, we need to do the best we can to curb this down. And the best way to do that is, if you're not going for an essential function somewhere, like working or going to school or things like that, try to curb any other, outside of the house social interactions. I know we had a holiday, people went shopping and all those type of things. Well, the holiday's over, folks. Let's get back to staying at home, break this trend. Vaccines are here, and let's get to a good point with the vaccines, and then we can get back to somewhat of a normal. So the situation is not very good in Tarrant County right now, and we need to take that very, very seriously.
Vinnie,
Yes, sir.
how do you square the 52.65% occupancy in ICU with only 6 ICU beds remaining?
So the rest is the regular folks in the ICU who have a heart attack, had an accident, had other, dying of cancer and needed ICU care, all those type of things. So the point is that no one disease should overtake your hospital capacity or your ICU capacity. It needs to be sort of a natural flow and the mix of everything, right? People still have critical conditions. Somebody had an aneurysm or something of that sort, and they ended up in ICU care. So those are the type of things we need to save ICU capacity for. Again, our doctors are doing the best to triage, but that means they're starting to make those decisions, who's more critical and whose life is more valuable. And that's a hard thing on our healthcare staff to be having to decide that I'm not going to admit you to the ICU even though I think you're critical enough, but let's try to treat you outside of there. So the 6 beds is after they're already triaging, and that's not good. So TSAE per DSHS dashboard, 23.36% of all the 19 county region hospital beds are consumed by COVID. That's 3,476 people, 55% above the 15% threshold. The 23 number sounds, 15 was just here, we're only 8% above. Well, We're more than 1.5 times above what the threshold was set at, and we're not slowing down. 38% of those hospitalized in the entire region are in Tarrant County, so that data has been sort of holding stable. And then for the 19-county region, same problem, 56 ICU beds. And again, that's just another indicator of the severity. I've been saying this from the very beginning. Let's not get married to one indicator, whether it's hospitalizations, ICU beds, number of cases, let's look at it all together. And if everything's going the wrong way, well, we need to do something as a community and turn the tide the other way. It's not going to stop on its own. We all have to take action and do our part to, again, bend this curve. So here's some charts and graphs. You all have seen this before. These are a refreshed look. So the chart on the left is our hospitalization chart. As you can see, numbers are just trending up since September, and we're not taking a break. We're at our pandemic highs and no sign of slowing down. Chart on the right is new. On our dashboard, we added the TSAE chart. So if you go back, the DSHS bar chart is what we look at. But just to kind of make it consistent with the way we've been viewing our dashboard, we added the same chart here in a line chart fashion. And as you can see, it's trending up above the threshold, and we're at 1.5 times that. Our epi curve, obviously not slowing down. We're adding more and more cases every week. So that's a trend up. The last bar looks always lower because the data is not completely reported. It takes a little while. Deaths are starting to climb. As you can see, it takes a while. When we had our peak in July, the deaths peaked in August. So now that we're trending higher, we're starting to see deaths sort of climb up after that. Worry is, where do we end up? We don't know. There is a shift in the cases. Earlier on, we had a lot of elderly getting ill in nursing homes and a lot of deaths occurring. Now it's out in the community. We have a lot of young people between 15 and 44 is like the big group that's getting ill. And maybe, hopefully, we won't have as many deaths because they're younger, they're healthier, but you never know. We've had people just randomly die. They had COVID, and that happens. Younger age group, under 15, when we were in March through July, there was like negligible number of cases, probably less than 5% or even lower. Now that the schools have opened and we've had a huge outbreak in the community, we've actually crossed over close to 12% of our cases are coming from that under 15 age group. And that's a huge chunk. I mean, 145,000 cases, that's a big load in our young children. As far as I know, hospital data that we look at, their in-hospital COVID cases in young children have been spiking to a pandemic high. So every age group right now is getting hit. Anybody who's mobile and out is getting hit. Those that are staying home, it's getting into their homes because other family members are coming from outside and bringing it in. So again, not to belabor the point, we're all going to have to buckle down and do our part. Stay home when it's not necessary to go out, wear a mask, avoid large crowds, stay 6 feet away from others. Yes, the vaccine's here. That's very positive news, but it takes a while to immunize 2.1 million people in the county. Until we get to a reasonable number of people immunized, we have to do our part because this is not really good for our community. There's a lot of disease. Here's another indicator. Again, we've talked about the red zone criteria from the White House. Case rate of 572 per 100,000. And they set a threshold of 100 per 100,000. It said, well, that's bad. You're in the red zone. Well, we're 5.7 times of that threshold. COVID-like illness, pandemic high of 14%. And that's just what we see. Like a lot of times when we hear from the ERs, the number is even higher. What shows up in our data sometimes, not the most, accurate picture, but it tells you that the trend is up. And that's bad news because more and more people are going to ER setting seeking care for COVID. Positivity rate is currently at 17%, but just over the weekend we were up at 20%. That was again, touching a pandemic high that we set in July. So that's 1 in 5 people that we're testing out positive. And there was a mad rush at our testing sites over the holiday weekend. we put out some record numbers. I think all of our public testing sites combined tested close to 18,000 people. And if the numbers hold true, 20% of that is going to come back positive. So that's a lot of disease activity that we're definitely seeing in our community. So, and if the bad news wasn't bad enough, I know some of y'all have talked to me individually about this, but there are a couple of mutations reported. Viruses do that all the time. COVID has done that in the past. Well, this one is a new mutation. There's one that they noted in the UK and another one that they noted in South Africa, and both have highly infectious mutations where they have started to become the predominant strain in those countries. They're about 1.5 times more infectious, so faster spread. So the worry is when it hits the U.S., it's presumed that it's here. But when we know, I think we're going to continue to see the numbers rise. Canada found it just a couple days ago. I was on a call with the CDC yesterday, and they said that they are beefing up our laboratory surveillance, so working with state labs and regional labs like ours, looking for strain collection so we can find out if that strain is here. They've implemented tighter restrictions from travel coming from overseas, so you're now supposed to have a test, pre-boarding test to prove that you're COVID negative, and they're strictly enforcing that, especially from the UK. And they've talked about that 122 countries are implementing that plan. Now, it's not going to stop the virus from coming in, but the goal is to slow down the burden of this other strain coming into the country and buy us some time so that we can get vaccinated. Early data from Moderna and Pfizer, the two approved vaccines, is showing that, yes, it is still effective against the strain. They're going to continue to study if there is any difference in efficacy, because what they did find was that one of the mutations actually occurred at the spike protein, and the vaccine works against the spike protein. So far, no concerns. But they're continuing to study that to see if there's going to be any change in efficacy. But so far in lab data, they're feeling pretty confident that it will work against this new strain as well. So I'll pause there for any questions, and then I'll switch over into vaccines.
Question. Do we know whether the strains in the UK and in South Africa are the same strain, or are they two different?
Two different strains, so two different mutations, and that happens with viruses all the time. They just naturally replicate and have a mutation, and this is what we've seen with many viruses. Even with COVID, we've had this before. If you all recall, there was a lot of media coverage that what started in Wuhan looked different than what hit Italy. It looked different than what hit New York, and what was on the West Coast was different than what hit New York. So there's always been mutations with COVID. It's just that this one seems to be highly infectious, so that's why the big concern. And again, we would be okay if our country was not at where we are. As a country, we're very high, and the concern is we can't take something that's more infectious, so we all need to do our part. That's all. I sound like a broken record, but really need to do our part so we can bend the curve.
You know, one of the things that the hospitals have kind of said, and the problem they're having now is staffing.
Yes.
And a lot of that problem is because there are agencies, there are contracting groups that are basically coming in and saying, okay, if you'll come work for us for 5 days, we can pay you 3 or 4 or 5 times what they have been making here. And so simply by, taking off for 5 or 10 days, they can, make a huge sum of cash, and then they come back and they've got their job. But in the meantime, we've been without critical care folks and nurses for our particular facilities. So again, when looking at the beds, I know you talked about the number of beds that they've got surge beds. They've got beds that they could convert or they could bring online. The problem they've got is staffing.
Yes, sir.
And with these, with these professionals being pulled away by other, sometimes it's even within the state, other cities within the state, then that is that is creating quite a crisis.
Absolutely. And staff get ill too. I mean, they might be wearing PPE at work, but then they go home and, they're not wearing PPE at home. and they're out in the community, and it hits them. So,
Well, and I know that the vaccines, and you're fixing to get into that, but I know that, in the vaccines, when it comes to particular facilities, I guess the average seems to be running about maybe 60% of the folks are getting the vaccines, and so they've got vaccines that they can give, and, I think some of them are looking at, okay, should we then begin giving to their immediate family? And doing, things like that in an effort to try to, get those vaccines out as quickly as possible.
So the plan on that, Your Honor, is very clear. The state allowed us to pivot between Phase 1A, which was healthcare workers and first responders and those groups, and Phase 1B, which is people 65 and older or 65 and younger with underlying health conditions. So we can get on a call with our healthcare partners to just kind of re-explain that. If family members fall into that group that are in 1B, okay, sure.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I think they're okay to pivot between the two phases, and I'll explain that. So let me kind of get on in there, and that way we can talk about the vaccines. So again, finally, last comment, again, not to belabor the point, what can we do as a community? And I want to be very clear. When we're eligible, let's get vaccinated, wear a mask, stay 6 feet away from others, and wash your hands throughout the day. Those 4 things together are what are going to get us out of this pandemic, and it's going to bend the curve. Trust me on this. It is going to bend the curve. If we do these things, it will work. Vaccines are here. So that's great news. We even got some doses, and I'll explain a little bit of that, but let me kind of cover the basics. So we got 2 vaccines. The last time I talked to y'all, there was Pfizer only had the approval. We were in the week 1 allocation. Our hospitals were supposed to be getting it. Well, right after that, Moderna vaccine got approved with the EUA. They are both mRNA vaccines. Both have 2 doses each. And Pfizer is given 21 days apart, and it's ultra-low frozen with that minus 70, minus 80 degree requirement. And it's approved for 16 years and older. And then Moderna is given 28 days apart. It's a regular vaccine freezer, I think goes to minus 20, and then 18 years and older. Technology is not different, and the only reason they're giving these because that's how their studies were set up, so they don't have time to mess with it and fine-tune, so they're going with what they studied, and otherwise they're essentially same technology. The lipid layer might be a little different, and some other things that they use in there might be a little different, but generally they're preservative-free, and there's no adjuvant of any kind, and that's why all these requirements of keeping it frozen. The chemical composition is very simple. The mRNA, a fat layer. That's it. And the fat may be 3 or 4 different components, but it's very, very simple. There's no preservatives. I know there's been a lot of concerns raised about adjuvants and preservatives in the vaccine. There is none in here. So the status for Tarrant County, we're just getting a good allocation. We're fortunate. Week 1, we got about 18,000 doses. Week 2, we got about 27,000 doses as a county. Week 3, allocation got released last night. I think we're slated to get 32,000 doses. So all in 3 weeks, we're getting 77,000 doses. Now the question is, how fast can we get it out? So as a community, we got to work together and get these doses in arms, because as you see, we're at the brink of a real problem in Tarrant County. And if other mitigation measures can't be put in place and the public is having a hard time following the other guidance, this is one strategy that we need to hit hard on as a community. Get vaccinated so we can try to break the cycle.
Vinny, let me ask you a question. On that, where you say Tarrant County, is
Everybody in Tarrant County, all the entities.
So that includes CVS, that includes Walgreens,
Yes,
that
sir.
includes everybody?
Private doctors' offices who received allocation, hospitals who received allocation, any pharmacies who got it. There's a variety of people. I think the number of entities was upwards of probably 50 on that list.
Because I know that there's been some confusion back and forth, or at least I think there has, between who's giving them to the nursing homes, and are those numbers included in those things up there?
So the nursing homes, and they're lumped together with long-term care facilities because that's other facilities that are not nursing homes. They're in a special program. So the federal government created a pharmacy partnership with CVS and Walgreens, and it kind of rolled out right at the time the vaccine was being distributed. So it was about a 2-day window I believe there's 278 facilities in the county, and I think 201 were signed up the last I looked, and it's been about a week. More probably got signed up. And the rest were supposed to sign up with a Texas program that I haven't heard details yet, but they're working on something at the DSHS level. So they had to hold back the Pfizer allocation because it was supposed to go to these long-term partnerships. They're supposedly starting on yesterday, December 28th. So I haven't seen those numbers in the allocations yet, but I think that's a special set. We're trying to gain more clarity. We're waiting on this sort of central dashboard that DSHS is creating for local health departments. So for the community, we could answer these questions. Who's got vaccine, who doesn't, how many doses are used, how many are left. And there's some concerns there that people that are giving the vaccine are not always able to get the data into MTRAC2 in a timely way. So there's a lag on how many have been given. So if you look at the state dashboard, yesterday it was showing only 5,000 or so given in the county, which is not true because we know our hospitals gave a lot more. It's just the data lag of getting everything in and looking at it. So we'll smooth that out over the next few weeks and get more detailed picture. But CVS and Walgreens are the two pharmacy partners for a long-term care partnership. I have not seen the numbers included here. My assumption is that's separate.
So, and also with these numbers, Vinny, this is Moderna and Pfizer, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
That is correct. So what are we doing in the county? So we're fortunate. We have a lot of great partners in the county. So Public Health got about 4,200 doses in our allocation this past week. And City of Arlington was slated to get 3,000. I think they only received it yesterday. Today is their first day of going live with the vaccine. So we've shared the effort. The fire department there, and they're under Dr. Cynthia Simmons, who is their health authority. They've been very, very helpful throughout the pandemic and even with the vaccine effort. So we've kind of split the county into a sort of an eastern half and the rest of the county. So as you can see, the red dots, cities all the way from Grapevine down to Mansfield, we're sort of trying to direct traffic to Arlington. Is it an absolute must that you must go there? No, we're both sharing the load. It's a load balancing effort. Like when they were delayed in getting their vaccine, we were getting people from everywhere. And I'm sure when we run out, they're going to get people from everywhere. But at least from people that we're inviting in phase 1A, you know, fire departments and healthcare workers and so forth, we're trying to direct to go to Arlington. They've got their own recruitment effort going and so forth, and rest is coming to public health. Public health ran 2 locations, you know, and we're based on how the vaccine was allocated. So there's the comment that I use about Texas pivot. So Texas allowed on the 23rd, right before the holiday, we got a very stern letter. Normally we don't get these, and when I say we, all the vaccine providers got it, from the Commissioner Hellerstedt, that what they're finding in their data is that people got the vaccine and are not getting it out in a timely fashion. So they allowed us to pivot between phase 1A and 1B. They said, don't wait for 1A to be completed. If there are 1B eligibles, you go ahead and do them. And as people had their plans in place, we had a plan in place to start with 1A and invite people. So what we did was we pivoted to 1B critical infrastructure, which is a huge group that includes city county employees, that includes police and firefighters that might be eligible in 1B and not under 1A, education, teachers that might be eligible under 1B, and several others. There's like 16 sectors. So we allowed for that. And now we have heard that we're getting 7,200 more doses, so my expectation is that we're going to be able to open up to all of 1B when the next round of vaccine comes. So we pivoted back and forth, and we've had some good luck here. So 4,200 doses allocated to us. We're already out of 2,384 as of yesterday, and we've got a bumper registration of 2,400 people today. Not all will show up, and we've got about 1,800 doses left. So if we get them all today, we'll be done, otherwise early tomorrow, and then we'll wait for the next shipment to arrive and then go on. But again, we're going to use that pivot. It's a little different. Y'all might have seen coverage. CDC was not recommending that. They had a phase 1A and a phase 1B and a phase 1C. What Texas has done is sort of squished together 1C and 1B and allowed, again, because where we are in Texas, we have a huge outbreak. So they're seeing this happen, and they're like, okay, that's one way to get the vaccine into arms quicker, so allow us the flexibility. And that has helped quite a bit. We have, again, tremendous partnership in this effort, even when we're doing it from public health. MedStar has been great. They've lent us a lot of volunteers who are acting as our vaccinators. We have Fort Worth Fire Department. They've been great. They've given us a lot of staff to help out. Immunization Collaboration of Tarrant County, always a great partner. Our Medical Reserve Corps has given us a lot of volunteers. And there's so many other entities that are just helping out. And one particular partnership I want to call out is the Tarrant County Medical Society. Their executive director, Brian Swift, reached out. There's a joint multi-county effort. So there's 4 medical societies, Tarrant, Dallas, Denton, and Collin, and 6 health departments in the area that had a special call with DSHS. Concern was about non-hospital healthcare workers in priority group 1A. Where do they get vaccinated? How do we reach out to them? So we talked to DSHS. We got a special allocation done. Kroger Health and their group of different pharmacy partners, they were on the call. They're going to be the entities giving out. So there's 4 pharmacies in the chain: Kroger Health, Brookshire, Tom Thumb, and Albertsons. In week 3 allocation, we got 2,500 doses for Kroger Health and Brookshire to start out with that group. And then, of course, Public Health, in our efforts, has reached out to the Medical Society, and we're letting home health agency folks come in. We're letting private doctors' offices come in. So we're not stopping them from coming in. We're just getting help from additional partners so we can get it done faster. Our estimate is close to 8,500 non-hospital healthcare workers are out there that are not immunized, and we want to make sure we get them fast, because I've talked to a lot of physicians. Some of them are seeing 15, 20 patients in a day that are COVID positive. That's a lot of exposures. Even though they're wearing PPE, you never know when a breach will occur. We're all human. So that's a lot that they're seeing, and we need to take care of them. And this partnership, again, is going to pay off quite a bit.
So Vinny, you just mentioned that 8,500 number. Is that for the 4-county region?
No, just for Tarrant County.
Just for Tarrant,
And the
okay.
2,500 doses are just for Tarrant County. I didn't look at the rest of the region. I don't know how many the entire region got, but Kroger Health probably will have that number, and we'll get on a call and discuss how they're implementing this.
Okay.
But in Tarrant County, Kroger Health and Brookshire got it. I assume Tom Thumb and Albertson is probably going to get it somewhere down the road. So where can the rest of the folks get it? Because there's been a lot of calls. I mean, I'm sure your offices have fielded calls, and so have ours. So for the general public, which is in phase 2, we urge a little patience. The plan is that it will be available at every corner. Pharmacies, doctors' offices, public health, hospitals. We're all going to get inundated with doses, and we're going to get it out at every corner, literally, because, that's the plan. And our goal is to get every person, but right now we just urge a little patience so we can do this in a little bit more orderly fashion, get to the priority groups first, and then, once we work through our Group 1A and 1B, which might take a couple months, because Group 1B is huge. We've got hundreds of thousands of people that are in that group that we need to address. So let's just work together, be patient. Those that are young and healthy, let's just tough it out a little bit and use the public health measures. Those that fall in these groups, let's get you immunized. And then I think it'll be probably around late February, early March is what the expectation is, that it will be widely available. There's a couple other vaccines working their way, and hopefully they'll submit to FDA in January. So we'll have more choices also to get to people. So that's kind of the plan, and I'll be happy to answer any question that y'all may have at this point.
So Vinny, earlier, and I guess was it in the 1B category, you had mentioned, is that where teachers fall?
So 1B is 65 and older, or somebody that's 16 and older with underlying health conditions. Our vaccine is Moderna, so we are limited to 18 and older. So if there's a teacher who falls in that group, either they're 65 or older or are younger and have underlying health conditions, yes. We're taking them under what we are calling 1B critical. So we sort of borrowed from the CDC plan a little bit and took our state plan and sort of gelled it together to find a quick way, because we only had 4,200 doses. But, if they fall in that criteria, yes, we're doing teachers, we're obviously addressing school nurses, other critical infrastructure staff anywhere, city, county government. You work in the waterworks department, we're okay as long as in your 1B. You work in the roads crew, if you're a government employee, we'll take you if you're in 1B.
If you're in, okay. I understand now. Thank you.
Vinny, in your effort to have the vaccine available on every corner, have you had any discussions about using churches, especially in the African American and Hispanic communities, as places where people can go in their communities to get vaccinated?
So we've had some preliminary discussions. Our first focus with the churches is actually to get the word out about the vaccine, how it works, is it safe, should we take it, get the education out. As we ramp up our vaccination effort, we'll at that point figure out if we need to fan out that much, because the resources always are limited. Every vaccination effort takes a lot of different kind of staff. So we're a little hesitant to commit right up front that we're going to fan out that much, because who knows? I mean, pharmacies may get it and then we may not need to do that. But the education piece is what we really need help with. I've got a few people that you suggested that I've been working with. They're really good partners. They're trying to get the word out. We're trying to start to do some virtual town halls with them to get the message out about the vaccine and its efficacy and the safety and why we should take it. So that's our initial plan.
So John Q. Public, 65, several underlying health conditions. Do they go to your website and register?
Yes. So what we're doing now is taking pre-registrations. I know that we're going to run out of vaccine probably today or tomorrow, but we're taking pre-registration so we can call out when the vaccine becomes available. And that website is www.tarrantcounty.com/COVID-shot. And again, I urge general, young, healthy people not to go to the website, because you're going to end up just crashing the website and you're not eligible at this point. But if you're in phase 1B, 65 and older, or younger with underlying health conditions, yes, please go ahead and start pre-registering, because that's how we're going to build our call-out lists. Y'all are now familiar with the process. Once you register, there's an automated call that goes out. If people don't answer, there's a message on the answering machine or on a text message, and the option's given, okay, you can come this day at this time at this location. We're allowing a little bit of flexibility that if you come the same day, we'll still see you if you can't make the particular hour that we mentioned. But we're asking people try to come within that time frame. Goal is not to have huge lines and then have an exposure somewhere if people start to huddle. Weather is colder, so still maintain the 6-foot distance. All those things still have to be taken care of. So it's important that people maintain their time. But yes, we understand. Like if I call you at 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. and you're here, we get it. So we're going to be flexible with that and try to work around people's calendar. But again, when you do large-scale efforts, it's hard to accommodate everything. So we just request that the public works with us too and be a little patient.
And we did discuss this yesterday on our call with the different agencies. The school districts were there. We sent out notices to all of the schools, letting them know the school districts, and then let them communicate to where they can get the nurses. And again, with the help of Arlington, we've divided it kind of east of 35, west of 35, and Arlington's has been a great partner with us.
Absolutely.
Chief Crossan out there has been just super
Yes.
from that standpoint, and I think when you look at it from a perspective that we've had almost 77,000. We're 3 weeks into the deal. That's almost 5%, a little short of 5% of the population. We just need to get that stuff out as quick as possible to everybody who's interested in doing that. I know that you just said you were flexible as far as the time goes, because I know some of our employees who have registered are getting calls, and I know that that's going to present some scheduling problems with our various departments. They're going to have to figure out how they do that, and then again, it's pretty much an honor system. When you fill out your survey, that's where you're going to report the fact, 1, how old you are, 2, if you have underlying health conditions, different things along that type lines, and we expect folks to be
Absolutely.
absolutely honest and truthful when they fill out those forms.
Right, and you're right. I mean, we're trying to get people the same day their appointment is. Initially, for the first couple of days, we were even allowing for a reschedule to the next day. But quickly, we realized the numbers are too big to continue to do that because then the next day kind of got overcrowded, and we're worried about people huddling together. So we took that option out. If you get a day and we give you a time, try to show up at that time. If you can't, then we'll see you that same day, because we don't know. Like yesterday, we had we did about 1,000 doses, 974 or something. Well, today we had 2,400 registered. So you just never know what the next day is going to look like. And if people can't make it that day and they come the next day, we might be out of the vaccine. So that's the real challenge, that you waited in line for an hour to get in only to find out that the vaccine went away. So we're trying to avoid that as much as we can, but it's very hard to manage all of that.
Well, so if you've got, if we've got a department where, the whole staff got a notice that said they were scheduled to be there at 10 a.m.
They can stagger throughout the day.
Okay, and
Yes,
if they can't get there throughout the day, what you're saying is they can come the next day,
But we can't hold the vaccine
but
for
you
them.
can't hold the
Yes.
vaccine. I understand
Yeah.
that. So they're just, so it's not a matter that they can say, okay, I need to get back in line for another day, or get back in line for a weekend or something along that type of lines.
Yeah, we're just not able to hold it. We'll try to work as many people as we can. But again, from a management of the crowd standpoint, we're trying not to have very long lines. And unfortunately, that's starting to happen at both our clinics. People just show up whenever they can. And sometimes the crowd is there and sometimes there's a lull.
And I know that you have to do the 15-minute observation
Yes,
period.
sir.
And have a medical team there in case someone were to react. Is there the possibility of setting up a vaccination site here downtown for the county that would allow for that, and maybe, in some of the buildings that have more of our employees who are dealing, with the public on a daily type basis?
We'll take that back into consideration. I think in the initial phases, all our resources are sort of trying to get the most vaccine out. When we split up the operation, it sort of slows things down because the qualified folks that we need to run everything, it's better that we do it in the masses. It's very quick when we have a line.
And I know I talked with the sheriff yesterday, who was very appreciative of the effort that's being made with y'all as well as with JPS in regards to the jailers. So, I appreciate your willingness to work and to do whatever we can in that regard. And I think that we, just because of trying to get all this done, I think we have surprised some of our department heads, and we probably need to get some sort of an email or something out to them, giving them a heads up. Of course, it may be a little late, but at least letting them know, and then which will give them some way to go through that process.
Absolutely. We'll rectify that. I know we try to get through HR. They send it to all county employees as we requested. Hopefully the department heads were reading that email as well. But again, we had to sort of be very flexible. We were trying to invite priority group A, and then the word got out, and group 1B was starting to register, and we're like, uh-oh, we didn't cover the critical infrastructure. They're eligible in group 1B. Let's get the emails out to all of them. So that's how it kind of
And
ended
then
up being.
people, like
yeah.
you said, people posted it on Facebook, and they did all this stuff.
Yes, exactly.
So it's kind of gone to the world now.
Right.
Mary Louise, have you got a question?
Yeah, I do.
Yes, ma'am.
Probably then you can answer it. So people that are signing up, because my department, they started signing up, on the vetting, is it just a survey? There's no, you're just hoping they're going to be honest about, yes, I have underlying conditions?
So let me address that. So initially, we had a different system where it was pre-registering into our EMR, and it was supposed to be a second step that you fill out the survey. And what we found was that people were not completing that. They were having issues getting access to the portal, password issues, and things like that, and it was locking out on a lot of folks. So that was creating us some problems. So we were triaging on site. We ask questions at the point of appointment, and if you're not eligible, ask you to come back at a later date and when you become eligible. Yesterday, we cut over to a different system. So it asks the survey questions, it does automated eligibility, and if you're eligible, so starting today, If you're eligible, people will get an automated email with, okay, now complete this second step, which goes into our EMR for the appointment. So it's still a two-step, it's just flipped it on its head, and it's starting to work much better starting today. Yesterday, we realized as the volume grew that we're really having problems filtering that out, so we sort of implemented a different system. So now it's automated and the eligibility questions are asked first versus in the second step.
So, Benny, a couple of things that I wanted to address. One is, I know that obviously we started, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
County Clerk, no, please go ahead.
So I guess my next question is, like you said, we're going to have to start triaging, you know, people are already signed up in my department and they're like, I'm scheduled, I need to go. Well, you're running out of vaccines, so now I anticipate everybody watching this, a lot of people are going to be, I guess 80% of us have underlying health conditions in the real world. So, you know, one, I just want to understand, Leslie, from your point of view, from the district attorney's office, you know, are we flexing that time? Are we, what is the wishes of the courts or the department heads when we start having that one department that says we're all scheduled? How, you know, do we just draw names and you know, what are you thinking that's going to happen? We're just looking for a little bit of guidance. That's all I'm asking for from y'all.
Well, my guess is, and I guess Leslie or Tina, but you are in charge of your department. And I don't want to get sued for telling somebody they can't go. Well, I mean, what is Leslie, do you have any?
My recommendation would be that each department head manage it to the best degree that they can. The restrictions would be that the department heads shouldn't be asking questions about the medical issues to try to serve as an investigator to determine who has the most serious underlying health condition. That's not the department head's role. So, you know, as far as should you choose randomly, it's really just, I think as they come, if you can allow that person to go get the vaccine, then you allow it, just like if they had a medical appointment. However, I do not think that there are requirements that they be allowed to leave during work hours unless this qualifies under FML, which they would need to complete paperwork for. And right now, we haven't been given guidance that to actually leave to go take the vaccine would be a serious health condition that would fall under FML. So
Tina,
obviously we
don't
want
hesitate.
we obviously want everyone to work with their employees as best they can, but they also have to continue their operating.
I mean, I would make this assumption, maybe incorrectly so, that if someone takes off and they're hourly, they take off like they would take off for any medical appointment or something along that lines. If they're exempt, then they still take off to go get the shot. It's just treated differently from a standpoint of pay,
Yeah.
payroll.
That's exactly right. Actually, while I was sitting in the back, Robin, who's in line trying to get her vaccine this morning, apparently has gotten some similar questions from employees, non-exempt employees who are inquiring about their absence from the work site and, you know, how that should be dealt with. And my response to her, my response to the court, is just what you've said, Judge Whitley. Our policies are the same. They haven't changed unless there's, you know, some directive to change them. And the way that it works is what you've just described. When non-exempt employees are away from the workplace, their time has got to be accounted for, either sick leave, personal leave, vacation. That's the policy currently. Exempt staff don't have that requirement. Now, if exempt staff is absent for an entire day, then of course they've got to account for their entire day's absence. But exempt staff are paid for the full day, even if they are away for a part of the day. So that's the county policy. And so unless we're told differently, that's what we intend to tell employees when they inquire. And apparently we've had some inquiries already, just as has been indicated. And so that would be our directive, and it's just what's been discussed. It really would be up to the managers, the appointing authorities, to make decisions about who gets to leave and who stays to ensure that there is coverage.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes. So Vinny, first I wanted to start off by thanking your team and other partners for being ready on Wednesday to start to deploy the vaccine. It definitely was a good experience to visit with public health staff on that day and to hear from them and others on kind of what this step in the COVID journey kind of means to them. So I wanted to be sure to express that thanks. Secondly, is just to urge, as you mentioned, how important the educational campaign is going to be. And certainly, given my background as a healthcare provider and also in science, I certainly trust, the vaccine process and trust healthcare providers and all of that, and knowing that there's so many challenges that everyone is facing related to COVID. And I know that there are some people who are, first in line to get the vaccine, and there are others who are going to wait and to learn more. And so I just want to say that I appreciate those who are still gathering information and trying to make the determination as to whether getting the vaccine at this time is the right move for them and their families. But it is really important with that educational piece that we help folks to understand the vaccine and answer as many questions as possible. I know you and I have talked about this at length, so certainly my office will be helping to disseminate useful information, and I welcome the community to get in contact with us, and of course with Public Health Department and with your own medical providers if you have questions, concerns about the vaccine, the two that are out for right now. So will you touch on a little bit of I guess there may be two more that you visited with us before that potentially would be receiving the UEA approval, and just kind of remind us what those are.
Absolutely. And actually now there's three more.
Okay, three more.
There is one, the Oxford University vaccine out of England. They're working with a pharmaceutical company called AstraZeneca, which is a global pharma company. And a lot of that vaccine is being produced in India with the Serum Institute of India. I think the initial order was like 2 billion doses, with 400 million estimated to split between UK and US. So that is making its way. I think it's up for approval in India right now. And the estimation is their CEO was on the news yesterday that they expect to submit to the FDA somewhere in January. They're, again, expecting close to 95% efficacy. We'll just see what the numbers are presented. Initially I had heard about 70%, but I think they're revising that up. And 100% effective against severe COVID illness. So that's great news. So that's one that we're watching. Again, I expect that to be a 2-dose vaccine. Different technology. It isn't an mRNA vaccine. I believe it's a viral vector, so different technology. And another one that is getting very close is the Johnson & Johnson/Janssen vaccine. Janssen's sort of the smaller tech company that working with Johnson & Johnson. And that's, again, a different technology. I expect somewhere end of January for them to submit their data for FDA approval. And if both get approved, we'll have multiple choices. And the fifth one in play, I think they're now entering their phase 3 clinical trial. That's Novavax. So again, we're looking for all these options. And I forgot to mention, a lot of interest in that Johnson & Johnson vaccine because it's a single dose. So a lot of people are waiting to see how well it does. And if it goes then one shot and done, I think we're all going to be happy with that. Yes, sir.
Well, it would be my advice to anyone who asks me to get the vaccine as soon as it is available to you. I can understand those who have some reluctance and want to wait and see how it plays out, see what the side effects are, see what's the experience is going to be of those who have decided to be early adopters. My advice to those who choose to wait is to wait safely.
Yes, sir.
Continue to wear your masks, continue to social distance, continue to avoid crowds, continue to do all the things that we know that will keep us safe, and make a decision about yourself and your family as soon as you can.
Absolutely. And let me add to that. So I want to be clear, even though we're all excited and we're trying to encourage people to get the vaccine, there is no pressure. If somebody doesn't feel ready, you're not ready. Nobody's forcing you to get the vaccine. What we want you to do is get educated, get comfortable, then make a decision. Avoid reading
And
fake
do
news.
that in an atmosphere of safety.
Yes, there's a lot of misinformation being spread. You and I, we've talked about this. People talking about this is going to genetically modify you. Absolutely not correct. Does not interact with a person's DNA, does not do anything to your genetic makeup. It uses the body's natural process to generate the spike protein. So it's a very advanced technology. Other thing that we've heard is, I get the COVID vaccine, I might get sick. Well, that's an age-old problem with vaccines because initially, like with the flu vaccine, you would take the flu virus, either kill it or make it weak, and people just got it in their head that it's going to give me the flu. Well, COVID vaccine does not have, these two vaccines don't have the COVID-19 virus in there, so you're not going to get COVID from the vaccine. So that kind of misinformation that's spreading, we need to curb that, and people need to get educated about it and then make their decision. And again, we encourage people to get it as fast as we can. But that's not a pressure that you must come and get it. So there's a fine balance there. It's still your choice, but we're ready to educate you, give you the tools and knowledge so you can make an informed choice and then get the vaccine.
And Commissioner Brooks, as you indicated, hopefully everybody will continue to wear the mask, continue to do the social distancing, wash their hands. Don't just protect yourself, protect your families as best you can, and we've got to get through it. And I hope that as we move toward New Year's Eve, that the cities will enforce the mask policy and enforce the things that are in place right now that can help contain that, and especially in those bar restaurants that have openly violated, I think openly violated the social distancing and the occupancy requirements that's set out by the governor at this point in time.
So here's my joke for the day. I didn't exceed my time limit. I called it. I'm just kidding. Thank you all for
Well, wait a minute.
come up.
Wendy, do you have a question?
Yes, sir. And I have a question since we have a large group of department heads here, so many can answer everyone at one time. Many of us have individuals within our departments that have had COVID recently, and is there a wait time frame from the exposure period, either from testing date, first date of noticing symptoms, or the 10 or 14 days, depending on when it was? What's the time frame for waiting for it?
So, very good question. So thank you for bringing that up. It's part of our FAQs. So if somebody has active COVID, they should not get it. If somebody has a reaction, like an anaphylactic reaction where they've had to use an EpiPen or had to be taken to an ER after taking an injectable vaccine or an injectable medicine, those folks should wait and talk to their doctor, see what's the right setting for them to go take this vaccine. So currently, those are the only two people that we're saying no to. If you've had COVID in the past,
In the past, how long?
up to 90 days. So if it's within 90 days, it is not a contraindication. So we're not saying no, but you have natural immunity for 90 days. So if you want to wait and give up your dose for somebody else to protect them, we encourage that. But if people want to take it and you're recovered, you're out of your 10-day period, you're okay to take it. What the CDC and all these folks don't know, and they're saying that that's why we're just a little cautious about if you want to wait 90 days, we're good. You just had natural immunity, and now you're giving it a booster and another booster. You might feel it a little in your arm and might get something, a little bit of a stronger reaction. So again, that will get reported and we'll find out if the data is going to change. But right now, if you're recovered, up to 90 days, it's not something that we're saying that you can't have it, but you can wait 90 days. So that's a fine balance. The other piece is if you're exposed. So if you had a positive family member, positive coworker, now you're quarantining at home, finish your 10-day quarantine period before you come out and take the vaccine. And there's a bigger reason for that. We don't want you to be unknowingly spreading the disease at the vaccine clinic or giving it to the healthcare providers that are giving you the vaccine. And then, of course, you might end up with an active illness, so we're trying to avoid all of that. So finish your quarantine, then come get the vaccine. Did I answer everything?
Along those lines, if someone had taken the first shot, but it was one of our employees and got exposed, should they then take the booster, or who will tell them that?
Yes. I think that was addressed, and if I'm wrong, Dr. Colquitt's back there, but I believe what they said was if you got exposed, wait your quarantine period. There's a little bit of flexibility. Even though the second shot is at 28 days, we can flex it out to 32 days if something like that gets in the way. They're trying to avoid you from coming in the time frame where either you're quarantining or you have active illness. So if that just happens at 28 days, then I'll defer to Dr. Colquitt. I think we're going to not do the second dose at that point and wait for them to recover and then come back and catch up. But that's how they're talking about handling it.
So my final question is not related to COVID, but to the flu. I know our action on consent, we already approved, I guess, the extension of our flu vaccine program. Just any important information to share with the public about the flu?
Yes, so the flu is here. Even though the numbers are considerably less than what we see in the previous years, that's been a global phenomenon. So it's not just something in the U.S. Southern Hemisphere were during a lockdown phase when we were all sort of staying home. So they had a very low flu season, and we happened to fall into a very comparatively milder year. But the good news is a lot of people have taken the vaccine, even through our program, through Public Health, JPS, FQHC, and the pharmacy partners. But that program is good because typically flu takes off around this time and continues their peak into February. So we encourage people to get the flu shot. So here's another thing. If you've taken the flu shot, current recommendation is wait about 14 days to get the COVID vaccine. It's not a contraindication. There's nobody saying, no, you can't have it. What they don't want to do is have two vaccines given close by, somebody has a reaction, and then we're trying to figure out which vaccine caused the problem. So they want you to be in the clear. No vaccine in the last 14 days, no illness. That's when you come and get the vaccine.
Okay. Thank you, Vinny.
Thank you.
Good stuff. Dr. Colquitt, thank you very much for everything y'all have done and that you've done in working with the other public health authorities here within the county, but also just working with everyone. So we appreciate you very, very much and appreciate the job you've done. Okay, we have a call, and then we have some folks here to make some comments. The first call that we'll make is to Ann Kaiser. Didn't like that, so we'll try this one more time. Okay, we'll come back and try her one more time in a little bit. In person, the first person I have is Nancy Groves, followed by Robert Bucher, followed by Doug Hines, followed by Sherrod Perry, followed by Blanca Martinez. Good morning.
First of all, I am puzzled at why you keep using CDC
Lisa?
guide. Excuse me?
Timer? Go ahead.
I'm puzzled as to why you keep using CDC guidelines for mitigation if your numbers are still going up. Why are we not talking about proven outpatient treatments like ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, and budesonide? It seems like doing the same thing over and over and not getting different results is not a good idea, and you're not really concerned about safety. It seems like we're all only concerned about numbers. I'm asking you to end the declaration of emergency for public health. The declaration of emergency for COVID-19 is based on fraudulent data. There's still no valid testing for COVID-19. The PCR test is 97% unreliable. This was in a court case in Portugal by some Germans that were held in their hotel in Portugal. This is all part of the World Economic Game Plan. Use PCR high amplification to justify lockdowns. And then step 2 is use PCR low amplification to prove vaccines work. Case counted without specific associated symptoms are bogus. It's a myth that asymptomatic people are contagious. They are not contagious. Wearing masks for people that are asymptomatic and healthy are worthless. Yesterday there was reported 1,425 total COVID-19 deaths in Tarrant County. We have an estimated 2.1 million people. We still have a 97% chance of surviving this COVID-19. The statistics, that's the statistic before you even subtract the deaths that could have been caused by something besides COVID-19, because the PCR test will test for dead virus, alive virus, and not necessarily just COVID-19, because it's never been isolated. Has the homeless population in Tarrant County been wiped out from this deadly virus? Has Walmart, Home Depot, Lowe's, Central Market, where everybody is close and together, have the employees gone home sick? Have they had to close their businesses? Have the teachers and children in the school all dropped dead from this virus? Where are the makeshift hospitals and clinics for the vast number of ill patients for this deadly pandemic? Have the people traveling in commercial airlines dropped dead? There are no more deaths this year than previous years. What makes COVID-19 an emergency? This is not about our safety. This is about control. The handling of this pandemic has exposed all the elected officials and those they have hired. We clearly know which officials serve their constituents and which ones answer to big money and big pharma. The emergency declaration for COVID-19 is a lie and a part of a political agenda. You are following the script for the Great Reset.
Thank you, Ms. Groves. Robert Bucher. Followed by Doug Hines, followed by Sherrod Perry.
I'm Robert Bucher. And before I get started, let's go ahead and let's put out the pictures of all the violations that we keep going through. This is Dr. Yannick, for people that don't know. Once again, no mask. Well, we talked about the crowds. Let's talk about the rodeo. I mean, this is more of y'all's people that are up in here. Surely there's got to be an email out saying, please put your mask on somewhere. I don't know. Missed that one. Missed that one big time. So let's get back onto this. So the University of Massachusetts had put out in an article for RNA. In 1998, Andrew Fire and the RTI's Craig Mello discovered RNA interference in which double standard RNA can find and turn off specific genes based on sequences. Now, I'm not saying that it might be in the vaccine, but it's in the vaccine. We have natural immunity. Finally heard Vinny say it, but before we didn't have natural immunity. No surprise there. Let's talk about a little bit about socialism. I talked to a couple of Tarrant County jailers which work for the Sheriff's Department. Take the vaccine or keep wearing the mask and possibly lose your workman's comp if you get sick with the virus. That was in the memo, by the way, in case y'all were wanting to know. I wonder if anybody on the task force that works for the governor's department or this one has anybody that has a disability on there, because it says they're supposed to, but y'all do what y'all want to do, because we don't matter. And that's in the 418-131 code that y'all follow, which is embarrassing. A federal mandate is an order or requirement by the federal government that a state or local unit of government takes some positive action. This is not to suggest that the federal government has no power with the states. It does, but its powers largely powers to prohibit acts that violate the Constitution, which is in the Texas Government Code. Move on. We don't look at that one. We just pick and choose what we do. A state of disaster might not continue for more than 30 days unless renewed by the governor. Legislation by law may terminate a state of disaster at any time. On termination by the legislature, the governor shall issue an executive order ending the state of disaster. Once again, the legislation that they keep slapping in the face is where they have to go for anything that they need. And then to read the blueprints, the double helix DNA is unzipped or to expose the individual strands, and the enzymes translate them into a mobile intermediate message called ribonucleic acids, RNA. The intermediate message is called RNA, and it carries the instructions for making proteins. So it's going to tell us what to do. Imagine that. And this is a study by people with degrees, real degrees, in case we missed the guy in the back. Here's the Robinson molecular machine responsible for manufacturing proteins. Here the ribosome translate the mRNA using another three-letter word. Every three basis pairs designate a specific building block called amino acids.
Time's up. Thank you, Mr. Bucher.
You're welcome. Highly
Doug
doubt churches need
Hines,
to be the
followed
first.
by Sherrod Perry, followed by Blanca.
Judge Whitley, Commissioners. If COVID-19 was the Black Plague, if masks actually worked, if social distancing actually worked, if the selective, arbitrary, and unreasonable closures of business and ruining of people's lives actually worked, if locking people in their homes in an endless display of round and round and round in their homes doing nothing actually worked, if closing schools actually worked, if the endless mind-numbing depression and social isolation worked, if all of these things actually worked to stop or even slow the spread of a deadly disease, we would all be working together with you. We would all be on the same page. Everybody would be there together. Then the right thing to do would be obvious. We would all work together. But every one of those suppositions I just went through is a lie. Every one of them. 10 months into this pandemic, we know the truth of what this is all about. It's been talked about here today. It's been talked about here for the last 8 months, whenever we've been in here. It's about world control. That's what it's about. So the right thing to do is pretty obvious from all what we know now. The right thing to do is to fight as hard as we can against the mountain of lies, the mountain of misconceptions surrounding this COVID pandemic. We got to fight this thing. The right thing to do is to stand up and support our constitutional rights for liberty and freedom, not have them taken away under this scam. That's the right thing to do. We are not here to limit the right of anybody in Tarrant County or the world, for that matter, to wear a mask. We are here for the right and duty of all, and the right that every citizen has to make their own decision on whether they want to do so or not. That's what should be done. Tarrant County and most of the world is suffering Satan's most widespread and complete lie in the history of the world. It's a perfect evil storm of tyrannical government, dishonest media, big pharma money, medicine, powerful corporations, and all of this lined up against we the people and against our Judeo-Christian foundations on which our constitutional republic was formed. All of this tyrannical madness that we've seen for the last 10 months here is being done in the name of science. The original promise of science was a search for the truth. That's not what science is doing today. The original promise was the truth. The science today is all about rejecting God's creation, rejecting the heavens and the earth were created by God. And rather than seeking to analyze and understand the glory of God's works, science seeks to deny its very existence. In doing so, I only have seven seconds here. In doing so, this science has been turned into a tool for Satan to fight against the freedoms of our country, the freedoms of Tarrant County, the freedoms of the world. I urge all of you on this commission to stand up, get on the full armor of God, and fight for the freedoms and liberties and fight against Satan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hines. Mr. Perry, followed by Blanca.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So since our last meeting, I did some reading, and I'll just hold this book up here. It's The Contagion Myth by Thomas Cowan and Sally Morrell. And it's a pretty quick read. And for months now, I've been operating off of this assumption that there's a virus. Although it's a very weak virus, once you really get down to it, it's actually a very weak virus. It's not that very deadly, and there are treatments that we've all talked about in here. So again, the government response to this virus has been far out of proportion to the threat. But now I have, partly due to reading this and also from doing other research, it's pretty clear to me at this point that there is no virus. There is no virus. I'm convinced of it now, okay? And Nancy, one of the earlier speakers, actually pointed this out, and several FOIA requests have been put out all around the world, okay? In the UK and Canada, Australia, just lots of places. They put out these FOIA requests saying, hey, can you show us proof that this virus has been isolated? And when we say isolated, it just means that can you give me like a physical sample of it? That's what people are really saying. Can you give me a physical sample of this virus? And every single FOIA request, the answer was no, we cannot. So they have not even been able to even produce the actual virus anywhere. So, but we're operating off of this assumption that there is one, even though it has not physically been observed. So again, the level of fraud and deception that's going on worldwide right now is so staggering that people have just basically shut their minds off to even consider what I'm saying. Because again, the point of this fraud is to lead us into, again, essentially, like I said, the end game is a one world government. But to get us there, you have to do several things. You have to make the people sicker, which is what's happening. We've been wearing masks for months, or most of us have been wearing masks. We've talked about how that weakens your immune system. I'm wearing my 5G shirt today because, as I pointed out before, some of the early installations of 5G were in Wuhan and in northern Italy and in New York City. Okay, and these are also places that have high air pollution. And the symptoms of radiation poison, as I pointed out before, are shortness of breath, blood clotting, fever. So these are symptoms that have been attributed to COVID-19, but they could also be very well symptoms of radiation poisoning, such as 5G wireless technology. So again, what we're calling COVID-19 sickness is actually being classified that, but it's actually there's strong evidence to show that it's coming from radiation poisoning, it's coming from the flu, which is why flu is down. It's coming from pneumonia and all these other illnesses that have always been with us. So that's what I'm getting at. This is a fraud. This is an absolute fraud. And anyone who goes along with it at this point is just showing a lack of moral courage, because it takes moral courage to admit that what you're dealing with and what we're facing,
Thank you, Mr. Perry.
okay, is immoral.
Blanca?
Good morning. Thank you for having us, listening to us, hopefully taking action on our recommendations. I was handed some pictures here that clearly show some of you members, the judge and others without a mask in close contact. That to me tells me that you in your heart know that this is a hoax. You in your heart know that something is not right. And it takes courage. It takes the Spirit of God and the power of God to come against such evilness, because it is a global thing. If you can look at UK and Australia and South Africa, what they're doing there to the people are dying. It's horrible. And yet here in the United States, we have been untouched, not untouched, but in the past have been untouched. Those were third world countries. Those things don't happen to us. And I believe it's because we had men and women of courage that stood upon the word of God, that stood upon God and said, not in my watch, not under my watch. Communism will not take over our country. Socialism will not. The New World Order will not, because they had courage to stand against the evil. There are known remedies and cures for this so-called, whether it's 5G, which it can very well be, or a combination of both. But there is some medicine. If you go to C19, C for COVID-19, ivermectin, ivermectin.com. If you go to americasfrontlinedoctors.com, Americas with an S, frontline doctors with an S, the whole word spelled out, .com. Or you go to budesonide, budesonide.com. All of these are sites that have studies and actual doctors, frontline doctors that work on the patients. And they've been able to document the fact that there is a cure. Therefore, there is no need for a vaccination. Therefore, because our numbers have not been above the norm of deaths, even if you can lie and attribute deaths to the COVID, when in fact they fell and broke their hip and all of a sudden they died of COVID. If you can take all of that into consideration, the death toll is not high enough to document or to acknowledge that there is an emergency. It is time to drop that emergency facade. It is time to drop the hoax. It is time to say, me and my house, we will worship God. We will do the right thing. Judge Whitley, commissioners, we are begging you to please at least look into what we're saying. We are being connived, we are being conned, we are being lied to, and the people are sick and tired of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We will try Ann Kaiser one more time. Okay, we're not going to try her again. Time's up. We have one other audience participation, and I'm going to go ahead and call on that audience participation at this point. Mr. Tony Abs. Mr. Abs. Please state your name. You have 3 minutes to make any comments you'd like to make at this time.
Thank you. My name is Tony Abs.
And you can take your mask off if you'd like to while you're speaking.
My name is Tony Abs. I'm here this morning to follow up on the last time I've been here about the Constable Mike Campbell's office over there off of Miller Street. On November the 3rd, as I said the last time, I was protesting and I was stopped by one of those constables. Not only that I was stopped for protesting, which is my right, it was also used bogus language, and every deputy in his thing used bogus language, the F, the B, the H's, and all like that. And the last time I heard, I was asking her, is there any way that this court can bring up, that we can put recorders and cameras on these guys, because I believe if these guys are gonna police us, I think they should be wearing cameras and video, recording, because the words that they use, the words that they call me is very unacceptable, very unacceptable. And I feel like if they had recorders on, they would not be using that language. And when I filed my complaint, what was told to me is they are preachers. Now, this was told to me. They are preachers, and they were just doing their job. I don't buy that. First of all, I have a right to protest on a public sidewalk. You cannot stop me or put your hands on me for doing that. And number two, I don't think preachers can use the language that I received that day I was out there. And that's uncalled for. And then I remember when we went on a court team, when we sat down in May, our Congressman Mike Vesey was on the news, pointing out a barbershop right across from Campbell's, near my office. Bunch of cars in the parking lot, and they wasn't getting a haircut. And this is a time when we were shut down, we were locked out. So if they were doing their job as they said they would do, why come they don't break that up over there? This is uncalled for. I really think that we need to put on our agenda of putting cameras and recording on these officers. If they're gonna police us, if they're gonna do these things, we need to have recorders so we can keep them in line and keep us in line. That's all I have to say.
Mr. Abbs, thank you. I believe the last time, did we ask you to speak with Mr. Manius? Have you done that?
Yes, I have. No, I have not. I have sent him an email. I have called his office several times. I have got I've got no call back, anything.
Okay, we'll see that there's a callback or some.
We'll look into that and make sure that you get a call back this week.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. You have a blessed day.
Thank you, Mr. Abbs. Okay, that completes our public comment. Miller, would you like to continue at this time?
All right, Judge, as we move to the administrator's section, item 1, we will have our report from Guidehouse. Rachel, are you on the line?
Yes. Hi, good morning. I'll just jump into it then. Good morning, Judge and Commissioners. If we can advance to the project status slide, we'll get started. We'll begin with our recent activities. In the past week, we've really focused on working with the county to identify metrics and key highlights from the county's CRF programs within the 4 pillars in order to put together a high-level overview from the court, for the court, which would be presented next week. We'll continue to discuss some progress. We've also been monitoring legislative updates, and we have our last slide today will cover the new federal funding. We've also been providing support for application review of the rental assistance program. Our areas for discussion today will be FEMA, the pillars of focus, county grants update, county spend update, and then we'll have, like I mentioned, a brief overview of the new federal funding and what we know so far. Any questions before I move on to slide 2? Okay, so moving on to the FEMA PA update. Since our last report, the project has been obligated by FEMA and it's in the closeout process. Our staff today, as well as the county staff, are having a discussion with TDM this afternoon, or this morning, I believe, about the next steps for this closeout process. So once it is obligated by FEMA, that means that it's now under TDM's control for review, and so they'll be getting into the next steps and moving forward with this closeout process and hopefully get that finalized pretty soon. Any questions on FEMA before you move on? Okay, moving on to our 4 pillars update. This slide captures our high-level updates from the county CRF programming. So just a couple updates, for the business, small business grant program. We've got those final grant awards being made today once they're approved by the court. And of course, as we mentioned, the rental assistance program reviews are still ongoing, although the applications closed on December 9th. Any questions on here before we move on? Okay, so we can move on to the county grants. No changes to this slide from last week. We are still at $235 million. And as we discussed in previous weeks, so we've got here the CRF right on top, and then everything up on here is referred to on later slides as the multiple grants. And these all have different deadlines for when they must be spent by. Any questions on the grant side before we move on? Okay, so moving on to the expense side. As we've discussed, the county has sufficient COVID-related expenditures to spend down its CRF funds by December 30th. But now that CRF has been extended through 2021, the county may choose to hold off on using all of its CRF funds right now and instead use other funds for these COVID-related expenditures. We know there's a big discussion and decisions to be had on that point, so we'll move through these two expenditure slides quickly so we can get to the federal funding slide. So far, the county has spent $141 million from CRF, and this includes about $24 million in encumbered expenditures. The county has continued to spend down through all these programs on the right, increased testing and small business assistance, rental assistance, as we mentioned, ongoing, and then the other programs listed there. Moving down to the multiple grants, the county has spent about $10 million so far, and this, as you know from the previous slide, is that long list of about 15, 20 or so grants that are not CRF. These, as I mentioned, have different deadlines for when they have to be spent by. And finally, on the total line, you'll see the $235 million corresponding to the previous slide, total obligated amount of $151 million, an amount to be spent of $84 million. And I know there's probably going to be some questions on the federal funds, so I want to move to the next slide. But before I do, are there any questions on this slide? So we can move on to the next one. This is just pretty much the same information as the previous slide. We won't go through the details, but the main difference here is that it includes FEMA PA as anticipated revenue. In the previous table, we haven't yet included FEMA as it's not yet final. Any questions here before we move on? All right, moving to our last slide. Here we've got the high-level overview of the new federal funding. We are in the process of reviewing each provision now. I'm sure you know the whole act is about 5,000 pages, but we believe a number of these will be allocated to federal agencies, such as HUD, who are going to use their own allocation methods. And others listed here are funds that would be allocated to residents directly, such as SNAP, or will be an application process for businesses such as PPP and SBA loans. So it's not yet clear entirely which, if any, of these funds will be directly allocated to the county. And so this is something to consider when deciding how and when to spend your remaining CRF funds. So here we've got, of course, the first thing is that the CRF coverage period has been extended to December 31st, 2021. And this is, we've been talking about that December 30th deadline for a long time now, and really finally, just as we're approaching it, they've decided to extend it for another year, which is good because it gives you a little bit more flexibility in deciding how to spend those funds. If you want to move some of those on to next year, you are more than welcome to do so. We've got some small business funding, and this one is going to be, PPP, the SBA loans, the EIDL loans. There's also going to be some support for local venues, cultural institutions, things like that. Vaccines, you've heard a lot about. There's going to be support going to CDC, to states and healthcare providers for vaccine distribution. On the education side, it seems to be that this fund's going to these existing CARES programs, such as the Governor's Relief Program, ESSER. There's also a higher ed fund in there that was established by CARES. On housing, the rental and utilities assistance is new. It's a new type of support for the federal government. We believe it's going to be going through HUD, and so it's going to be a little bit different, I imagine, than the kind of rental assistance programs that have been done so far, because HUD has its own eligibility guidelines and so on. So as, once they release their eligibility criteria and eligible use of the funds, we'll get a little bit more information there about how this rental and utility assistance fund relates to what the county has been doing so far. And then, of course, in here, the eviction moratorium was extended through January 31st of next year. On food and nutrition, there's been an increase in SNAP benefits, so that's just increasing the amount of benefit per beneficiary. And there's been some assistance for food supply chain support, so with stores as well as food banks and things like that, just to make sure that there aren't any shortages of essential food. On the child care side, there's been an increase in access, and I believe that is going through the CC DBG fund, and as well as some operating support for child care businesses, just making sure that that market is still, running well, and, businesses aren't closing, so that when inevitably people need to get, child care again, they have, business to go to. And then finally down there, we've got broadband. This is a program that's going to focus on internet access for low-income families. There's, I believe, an established fund at the FCC that's going to be doing this. And within this provision, there's also some funds dedicated to telehealth. So these are just kind of high level, and there are definitely more funding areas and categories that are part of this act. But these are just the ones that we thought might be most relevant to the county. And like I mentioned, given what we know so far, it's still not entirely clear which, if any, of the funds will be directly allocated to the county for them to decide how to be spent. So really on this slide, the only thing that we know the county has is its existing CRS fund to be spent next year, and others, it might go to the state. Some of these are going to go directly to individuals. And so when thinking about your funds for 2021, these are definitely things to keep in mind, and we'll have more updates, as the federal agencies are releasing their plans for these funds. I want to pause. I'm sure there's some questions on this one. Is there anything you want to talk about these new funds?
The one question that I have is regarding the education. You said as an example the governor's relief. How do we get from public schools to governor's relief?
Yeah, that's just one of the education funds that they set up through CARES. So there's 3 that I know of. Governor's relief is one of them. The ESSER, this is the emergency fund for schools that is direct to schools. And then finally, there's a higher ed fund. I believe the governor's relief fund is a direct fund for education, but I'll have to double check on the details of that one.
Yeah, I mean, I know that the state is supposed to be, they're supposed to be funding public education, but about over half of that rests with the local taxpayers. And so if they're getting money to do that, I hope that we can get some examples of how they're using that to reduce property taxes.
Yeah, so I think education is a good example of one that seems likely to be going directly to states for them to decide how to use, and that's, I believe ESSER goes direct to school districts. So in terms of how the state is going to spend its education money, we still don't have a lot of information. As we saw, this past year, the state has not, we had that Operation Connectivity and a few other programs, but it wasn't, a ton of money going to the county as far as education money from the state. So we're still not sure what that's going to look like next year.
So we hope they spend that money better than they spent the money that went to them for local governments that they didn't spend.
Well, yes, we hope they do spend the money. Yes.
Thank you.
I had the exact same question you did, Judge, about this education category. So it looks like there's just still some more information that we need to get.
Yeah, and we can provide, if you'd like, we can send an overview of what these different funds are in more detail for Governor's Relief, ESSER, and that higher ed fund, just so that you have that background. But it is our understanding that new funds dedicated to education are going through these existing programs. So we'll follow up today with that information.
Okay. Thank you, Rachel.
Anything else on new federal funds or on the presentation overall?
Thank you, Rachel.
Do we have any actions to take on item number 1?
I have some other items I want to report on. Our staff is currently looking into all of the aspects of the recently passed and signed bill, so we expect to see more information in the coming weeks on that. I do want to go over shortly the weekly status report for the Care for Tarrant programs and touch on a few things on that area.
Excuse me, Lisa.
And before we do move on,
Lisa.
I do want to note that, I'm sorry, Judge, Commissioner.
Could we get a report next week or at the latest the week after on how this new funding from the Congress is going to impact our rental assistance program funding. I know they have extended the moratorium deadline on evictions, but there's still a lot of evictions in the pipeline, and there's still a lot of work to be done to keep people in their places of residence. A lot of work to be done with landlords and tenants to come to an agreement. Could we get an update on that
We do plan on bringing.
next week or
Yes.
the week following?
We do plan on bringing that to you on how we will proceed with our current program, and now that the CRF deadline has been extended, and how we'll proceed with that program, and then how the new program, we might move forward on that, because that will have some income limitations that aren't provided
That
for
aren't
right
in the
now in
current,
our current
yeah.
program. So they may be bifurcated on multiple programs running at the same time, but we're working on that right now to clarify all that, and we'll be bringing that to you in the next week or so. So I do want to touch on, Guidehouse will be presenting next week a 2020 wrap-up report even though we realize the extension of the CRF fund deadline will actually have additional funds out of our programs. We did want to provide a 2020 wrap-up so we could have a snapshot of what we have done for the year, and that'll be presented by Guidehouse next week. So I do want to touch on again the items in the Care for Tarrant update that you have in your packet. Round 2 of the Small Business Assistance Program has been completed. There will be 3 additional grant awards included in today's claim register, but this will close out the Small Business Assistance Grant Program with a combined total from Round 1 and Round 2, with awards to 2,920 businesses and a cumulative distribution of $23,309,136.47. Now that the program has been completed and those businesses were deemed ineligible have been determined and notified, the auditor staff has been able to compile data to address a question that Commissioner Allen had brought up a few weeks ago. And I believe, Commissioner, you wanted to look at how many of the businesses were found to be ineligible in Round 1 and how many of those reapplied in Round 2. And those that reapplied, how many received awards the second time. So in your packets, there is a sheet that gives you this information that sums up what the auditor's office had put together in terms of data. And roughly, we had 71 applicants that had applied in Round 1 and were deemed ineligible, and they reapplied in Round 2. 35 of those were still deemed ineligible in Round 2, and 36 were found to be eligible and were provided awards totaling $273,651. So again, this information is in your red folders along with a listing of those businesses that reapplied. I wanted to touch on, in regards to testing, the Tarrant County test sites administered 17,698 tests in this shortened Christmas holiday week, with all of our testing sites being closed on December 24th and 25th, so our testing numbers did decline somewhat from the past weeks. Please note, as of January 4th, TDM will be taking over operations of the TCC South Campus and the Arlington ISD sites. This will free up Fort Worth Fire and Arlington Fire Departments from those sites, and as well as our public health personnel who've been working at those locations. So,
Excuse me, say again what's going to happen to those sites?
TDM's going to take them over.
TDM's going to take them over.
Okay.
Yes,
TDM.
as of January 4th.
Okay, thank you.
And they've been running all of our other sites anyway, right?
They'll
The
have
majority
full
of them, yeah.
operations of that site, correct. In regards to our rental assistance program, Commissioner Brooks had mentioned that we have been moving full speed to review and process the applications that were received by the December 9th submittal date. As you note in your report, 850 applicants have received assistance to date, with over $3.6 million paid out. We have another 115 awards on the claims agenda today. That's another payment of $344,590, and another 161 applications are in the process of final review for payment. So this leaves approximately 2,200 applications, though, still in the system to be reviewed and processed by our rental assistance team. So that's what we will be working hard at the next month or two or three. And the extension of this moratorium does give us a little bit of help in getting those done before the January 31st extension under the federal bill. But we are still kind of drilling down into the Texas Supreme Court's extension deadline to March 15th also, to see how that impacts our program. And again,
I
we'll
would
be...
just like to make the point that this 3,000 odd applications does not even scratch the surface of the demand that's out there.
We understand.
All right.
On our NGO awards, they have been completed, and awards totaling just over $8.2 million have been distributed, and these continue to be reviewed for the expenditures made. And with the extension of the CRF deadline, it may allow some of these nonprofits additional time to spend those monies that they were allocated. The distributions to our municipalities and local partners remain unchanged from our last report. So that covers our weekly report on the Care for Tarrant programs, and I can try to answer any questions if you may have them.
Any questions?
Yeah, I do have one question. Back to the rental assistance is, I think it's important to see where that support has fallen geographically. I know obviously the month-long awareness campaign, well, and it was more than that, but just that concentrated effort. I would be interested to see where did that have the most impact, and if we need to do some targeted efforts with the current program, and then whatever the new funding is provided with, another program. So
I know that that's something we're working on, also due to the limitations on the income level. So we may be targeting, like you said, specific areas for marketing of that second program. And I know that Kristen is in discussions right now with the city of Fort Worth and Arlington, because they will be getting direct funds also, that we can kind of coordinate our programs countywide on that also.
Well, I know that the team has done a tremendous amount of work leading up to this point, and with these 2,000 plus applications yet to be processed, and then to Commissioner Brooks's point about the tremendous amount of need, just want to encourage them not to get discouraged or tired. The work that they're doing is so very important to keeping folks in their homes. So,
thank you.
Absolutely.
I don't have any additional items for you today, so that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Human Resources, Ms. Glenn. Move. James, come on down. Do I have a motion for number one?
Move to receive and file the personnel agenda.
Second.
We have motion and second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Our second item is looking for approval of leave and pay options related to the continuing pandemic. So just a bit of background, the federal acts that authorized all of the leave policies that we currently have are expiring on December 31st. So what we're looking for is direction from the court on how to continue effective January 1st. We do know that employees continue to be absent. We've seen some pretty significant increases in employee absences over the past 2 months, November and December. So we've got a proposal for you. It was attached to the agenda. Does anybody want a paper copy of it?
Yeah, give me a copy.
Yes, sir. It's on the way.
So I'm going to ask a question that seems like it would have an obvious answer, but obviously with what the federal government just passed, there is no provision for leave, right?
Correct.
Okay.
There's some information that applies to private sector employers, but none of that applies to public sector employers.
And what you're proposing here is basically what we have been doing, and will require payroll and audit to make maybe a couple of little tweaks, but no major changes in the payroll system itself.
They will need to create new absence codes because the old ones allowed us to do some tax things behind the scenes.
Tweaks.
So, yeah, it will require new codes, but it shouldn't be anywhere near as complicated as the existing codes were.
Okay.
My concern is that we are 9 to 10 months into the pandemic, and we have reached the point where employees have exhausted their leave buckets and may still be faced with a pandemic emergency where they will need to quarantine or get treatment even. What do we do with those employees?
Correct, and that's why we're looking at this proposal. So let me outline that for you briefly. As the judge said, this is very similar to what we have now. What we're looking at is 2 weeks of what we're calling pandemic-related sick leave. If it's FML eligible, we're calling it pandemic-related sick FML. So same things, just one is qualified under FML, one is not. For 4 reasons. Again, we tried to simplify this. It's the same sort of reasons as before, but not as many options because we don't need them all. So number 1 is the employee's been advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine or is experiencing symptoms of COVID-19 and is seeking a diagnosis. That's the one that we're seeing overwhelmingly right now and will most likely continue to see overwhelmingly. Number 2, employee is caring for someone who has been advised as described above, so a family member. Number 3, the employee is subject to a quarantine or isolation order issued by a government entity for the population at large. Nobody expects this to happen, I don't think, but if it does, it's there in case we need it. And number 4, the employee is caring for his or her son or daughter if the school, place of care, or child care provider of the son or daughter has been closed or is unavailable due to COVID-19 precautions. I want to emphasize this is not a situation where parents who have the option of sending their children to school would qualify. The school, the place of care, the child care provider must be closed in order to qualify. So what we're looking at is 2 weeks of leave for those reasons at 100% of base pay. For an additional 10 weeks related to child care of leave, we are proposing that 2/3 of base pay be allowed for those individuals requesting leave for those same child care purposes. We do have some details outlined here, but we're going to take all of the definitions of these terms from the federal acts, so we're not trying to recreate the wheel there. We'll just continue that. A couple of notes: it will include temporary employees. It'll be prorated amounts based on their schedules, and the same length of service requirements as before. So it's 0 days for the 2 weeks. It's 30 days for the additional 10 weeks. As I mentioned, some of the employees will qualify under FML. So reasons 1 and 2, you could qualify for FML. In that case, certainly direct your questions to us and fill out the FML paperwork, the normal FML paperwork that we've been using for many years, not the new federal stuff, because that is different. A couple of notes on changes. The primary one, we will require an application as we did before, but we are going to request medical and/or child care certification or documentation. We heard from our supervisors that in some cases they were doubting requests. They wanted us to be able to ask for documentation, so that will be a requirement under this current form, or this current leave. We're not going to pay out any unused paid time upon termination. This isn't like vacation or sick and personal. It's just simply available and won't be paid out. We are looking for an effective date of January 1st through what we've got is June 30th, but it could be before or after that, depending on the court's preferences when we get there. Two more notes I just want to make in general. We are not restricting employees who have used their emergency paid sick leave or their FML, their emergency paid FML, from using these new leave types. They could re-qualify, they could qualify for a new event. So we are not restricting anybody from applying to this. And just a general reminder that we'll send out, should it be approved as well, protected health information. Commissioner Allen asked us to mention this. Please make sure you're not disclosing individual employees' diagnosis status. That is protected health information. It's not to say you can't inform staff that there has been or could have been an exposure, but you can't release that employee's name. With that, I'll take your questions.
Questions? Mary Louise, have you got a question? Come on forward.
So my question is on the 10 weeks, 2/3 pay, do we have the expectation if the school's closed and they have offer online, the school is not technically closed, they're expected to be at work, they're not going to take off because the school may be physically closed, but how are I anticipate if they come to me and say the school shut down but there's an online option, I don't look to give 10 weeks off.
I think Ange addressed that.
Ange?
Is it in
I think so.
I don't think she identified that.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
Excuse me, under the federal guidelines, if they're physically closed, the school is closed. Doesn't matter if there's an online option or not.
I'd say the court just,
Because I get there's theory and then there's how it plays out day to day. So will you ask your question again? Because I'm kind of missing the distinction, which I understand that there is.
School is closed, physically closed, they can't send their kids to school.
But they're online and they're learning. If they're learning online, the child is learning online and they're getting credit, then is the school closed?
Well,
And
if they can't take their kids there and leave them there, then the school is closed.
If a child is 8 years old, they can't stay home by themselves.
And so to counter that conversation, and I absolutely agree to that, you have childcare, you've always had childcare issues. I had childcare issues when I was young, and I just couldn't call in and say, Junior's home and I need to stay home. Do you see what I'm saying? We're just trying to figure this out. So if there's an exception, Leslie, that we could look at, because that's what we did in my department. I mean, we gave them an opportunity to find childcare. Little Bobby's 8 years old. He's not going away. And so, you have to find somebody to take care of Bobby because you need a job. So, if it goes past 10 weeks, Commissioner Brooks, I mean, now 12 weeks, what are we doing? You're still going to have the same conversation with me. So I'm looking for a balance.
I don't know how many schools are closed right now. And what I have tried to do is avoid going down what-if paths, because we'll be what-if to death. What if it's 9 weeks? What if it's 12 weeks? What if it's 15? What if they're closed apart? I mean, I think we're going to have to address it as it becomes
an issue.
And right now, I don't believe it's an issue.
How was it addressed when the federal program was in place?
So anybody whose school was closed whose child's school was closed would have been eligible for it.
It was the same thing.
Physically closed.
Physically closed, okay.
But most schools were not physically closed. In
Not
fact,
right
I'm
now.
not sure, but just a couple of schools have closed for a period of time
Right.
while they were cleaning at that point, but no schools have physically closed for 10 weeks in a row.
Not recently. They did in the spring, but not
Well,
recently.
yeah, in the spring, yeah.
Yep.
But would there not be an expectation for childcare? I mean, the child is not going to not exist at any point in their life.
Again, I guess we can look more into it. I'm not prepared to make a statement at this point. So we can look at that further to determine that and see what action we may feel like we need to take.
And I just ask y'all to consider options for us as departments, larger departments with lots of families, and 10 weeks out, you know, a potential. If legally we can, you know, do something different, or just look at options maybe.
That was really where I was headed. My question would be, well, what are our options legally?
Is there an age range? Yeah, is there an age range?
So my understanding of HR's proposal is that they are following the guidelines that were mandated by the Family First Corona Response Act. And so if we remain consistent with those regulations, then under this scenario, if a school is closed, then physically closed, so the child cannot physically go to school, then during that closure, they would be eligible for this paid time off. Because this is not the federal mandate, it's no longer federally required, should the county choose to make stricter guidelines, then there is not a restriction from doing that, depending on what it is. So if for some reason we wanted to say that is not going to be eligible, then the county is writing its own policy. I will say that at this point in time, it is common for employers who are continuing this voluntarily to follow the federal guidelines. That is common right now, which is probably, I'm assuming, why HR is making the proposal that it is. I do think from a practical standpoint, I'm not aware of any school closures since school has resumed, since the schools were allowed to resume under the health orders. I do believe that some schools have closed for a period of time during the holidays because of an outbreak and potential close contacts that did exceed the 2-week period, which typically your child is sent home for 2 weeks. If your child is identified as a close contact and they're sent home for 2 weeks, then that parent would be eligible for either their emergency paid time off at 100%, or if they've already exhausted that, the 2/3 under EFML. And so practically, I don't know that it is going to pose a problem, to your point, Judge, about the what ifs. Practically, we have not seen that occur. And with the vaccines, I'm not sure if it is expected.
Let's continue to look at this. Today, we've got this particular issue in front of us, and let's just continue to look at it and come back with recommendations as y'all see fit. Thank you.
Do we need to adopt this proposal?
I believe so, yes.
I move approval of the current proposal and urge that we continue to look at situations as they develop and be flexible in reacting to them.
Absolutely.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ange. Are there any appointments today? Then you have before you the claims, including the addendum.
Move approval of the claims, including the addendum.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. We've already handled our briefing items. There are no more public participations. We have no close today. I would like for us to close today in memory of Jerry Jones, one of our jailers who passed away this past week. And with that, if there's no further business, we are adjourned.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year, JD.